Hello? Test, test. Yes, it does work. Do you hear me? Great. But look, you don't hear me. You hear just in the mic.
Okay, so I will use this one. And okay, so I hope you can hear me now. And thank you very much for your patience. We will start now the session on AI governance. So my name is Yoichi Ida, the Assistant Vice Minister at the Japanese Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications, and the moderator of this session. And we want to talk about the global AI governance from different perspectives, from different communities, such as government,
Check.
industry, and civil society, including youth. So we have a very
Check.
wonderful
Hey,
set
hey,
of
hey, hey. Okay.
speakers from government, Ambassador
Test.
Henri Verdier from French government, government of France, uh, and then from industry we have Melinda Claiborne, if I pronounce correctly, and she's a policy privacy policy director from Meta. And we have one speaker from international organization OECD online, Ms. Audrey Plonk, Deputy Director of Science and Technology and Industry Innovation Directorate of OECD. From civil society, we have two speakers. One, Ms. Thelma Hui, if I pronounce correctly. She's a director of infrastructure skills and empowerment from Smart Africa. And also we have one more speaker from civil, in particular youth community, Mr. Levi Shanseke, the representative from Zambia Youth IGF. So thank you very much to all of you for joining us, and we will have a very productive session. So in the beginning, I would like to invite all five speakers to speak about your views on the general current status and also challenges in AI governance. Probably in your own domestic AI governance situation, or probably you can talk about the global AI governance situation. And you can also touch upon your priorities, what you are most expecting from AI, and what you are doing now. So I would like to start with Ambassador Henri Verdier.
Very much. Do you hear me? Thank you, Yoshi, and good afternoon, everyone. So you did ask us a very important question, and you did ask us privately to do it in 4 minutes, so which is impossible. Uh, Maybe the main challenge is quite simple to say, not to do. Are we sure that this impressive revolution will be a progress? A progress, not just innovation, not just power, but a progress for humankind. And that's probably the main responsibility of governments, to be sure that we will balance innovation and security, economic growth and equality and efficiency and diversity, and to find a good balance. And that's why we are part of course, of a global movement with important companies, a multi-stakeholder community, but probably as governments, we have at least a responsibility in front of our citizens to pay attention to this. And as diplomats, I am a diplomat, we have a responsibility to do it within an international framework and in conversation within an important multi-stakeholder community. And if we start with the idea of progress, and then I will pass the mic to other speakers. I just want to emphasize that since the beginning of this story of AI, we have had different conversations about. So last year, for example, the main topic was existential risk. Uh, Now we are speaking more about, for example, equal development and are we addressing the needs of emerging economies. I think that the most important is to start by recognizing that we will have to face lot of challenges and to try to have a broad vision of all the challenges. So security matters. Security is not just AI becoming crazy and attacking humanity. Security is also cyber security. Security is also bias. Are we sure that we did train the model with good data and that we are not just reproducing current inequalities? And security is not everything. We also need to think about cultural and linguistic diversity. I deeply believe that if you don't have a large language model for your language will disappear as a working language. So as an economic language. So we need to be sure that everyone we have the possibility to enter in this revolution. Diversity doesn't mean just sorry linguistic diversity, because you have also to train the model with a knowledge of different culture and to be sure that your point of view, your history, your perception of the world will be taken into account. We'll have soon to face the question of environmental impact of intellectual property. Are we sure that we still know how to pay creators and creations? And do we have the good framework? Maybe you will tell it. You will tell about this. Maybe we have to find new concept to protect privacy, because maybe just to protect my personal data is not enough to protect my privacy. Uh, and we can continue. Maybe we need a specific policy to be sure that we'll train enough skills and competencies in emerging economies, and they will take a seat on the driver's seat and not just as consumers. Maybe we have to rethink about education, and not just to train engineers, but to be sure that growing up, the future citizens will be ready for this new world and there will be free minds and free citizens in a new world. So I could continue, I won't, but the idea is that to the holistic approach and the perception of the global question we have to face is, from my perspective, very important. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ambassador. And you talked about a lot of various risks and the challenges, and particularly you talked about the security or diversity. Diversity will be very important when AI continuously develops, and also we need to recognize the importance of protecting children or next generation. The lot of risks and the challenges were talked about, but at the same time, we also recognize the importance of innovation. So, what about the industry's perspective? I would like to now invite Melinda on your for your to share your views.
Yes, thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? Yes, okay, great. So, just a little bit of context to set the stage for my perspective from Meta. Two things. One is that in the AI space, we are very much an an open AI company, not open AI, but an open source AI company. And what that means is that we are all in on providing our AI technology on an open source basis. So our large language model, Llama, we have different versions of it, but is made available to anyone to download for free. And this, in our view, is the best way forward in terms of approaching AI innovation for a few reasons. One being that for developers, it is the most valuable and flexible option for them to build on and be able to customize applications to their local needs, fine tune the way they would like to with the data that they want to. It also is the best, we think, from a kind of economic development perspective, being able to provide a really diverse ecosystem of AI tools to developers and to countries is going to have the most benefits from an economic perspective because people won't be locked into a few companies that are providing closed models. And then finally, it benefits us as a company because we won't be beholden to other operating systems, so to speak, that people will be building on our technology, which is a benefit to us. And we also come at it from the perspective of a company that has supported and signed on to various AI global frameworks in the last year, including the Seoul AI Frontier AI commitments, which will require us to publish an AI safety framework before the AI summit in France next year. As an early adopter, also of early supporter of the G7 code of conduct. And so that's our perspective. And what I've seen happening, I think, in the AI governance landscape, there are some positives and some challenges. I think the positives are that we've seen a real harmonization in the AI safety conversation at the global level. So there's a increased understanding of the safety risks. There's an increased understanding of the steps that we need to take to mitigate those risks. And more importantly, I think a firm understanding that we need to have a harmonized global approach to this global technology. I think some of the challenges, however, that we're seeing are that there's a lot of conversations happening that are not necessarily relating to each other. So while we have international agreement on the safety conversation, as the ambassador pointed out, there are other conversations happening. So there's the data conversation around data privacy and the use of data. There's the copyright conversation that's happening. There's the conversation around the governance of all AI, not just advanced AI, but kind of our classic AI, and how do we guard against the risks and harms from regular AI when it's used to make decisions that affect people's lives. And so I think those are some. Of course, there's the industry. There's a lot of industry standards being developed that are important in different ways. And then there's the conversation around the AI safety institutes, which I think in a positive development are being stood up around the world that will help with the science of AI and the evaluations and benchmarks that should be looked to for AI governance. So I think the question is going to be how to tie a lot of these things together as they deepen, as the science deepens, as the industry standards deepen, as the global frameworks deepen. How do we connect these pieces to make sure that they talk to each other? And then finally, the point I want to make about one of the priorities that we have in terms of the AI governance conversation is how do we reflect in our governance frameworks the realities of the AI value chain, and particularly open source AI. So what do I mean by that? Well, so what we need to do is reflect the different roles that the actors in the AI value chain and ecosystem have to play, and those are unique and different roles. So what the model developer has within its responsibility in terms of safety mitigation, risk mitigation, then what role does the deployer of the model play? And then the downstream developers. all of these players have unique roles and responsibilities. And I think as we look at a comprehensive kind of governance framework for the ecosystem, we need to take that into account. So, speaking from the open source perspective, we don't have the control and visibility into the downstream uses of the model that a closed model provider might, simply because anyone can use our model for any purpose. In that case, then what are the responsibilities of the developers who are developing the applications for very specific use cases? And so I think we need to bring that complexity to the conversation to make sure that we're addressing using the right tools in the toolbox to address the harms that might arise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melinda, to cover the a lot of things. Actually, the divergence or maybe the parallel things are going on as the international discussions on governance frameworks and whatever risk assessment. And this, I thought, will be the second topic in our discussion. But before that, I would like to invite other speakers to share your overviews on the general fundamental understanding on the current situation. The previous two speakers covered, a lot of elements like risks and challenges, and also the opportunities and diversity and inclusiveness will be also very important part. And now I would like to invite Telma from some African view. When you talk about AI governance, what you would prioritize and how you regard the current situation.
Okay, thank you very much, and I hope everybody can hear me. So first of all, I'd like to clarify: Smart Africa is not we are a multinational organization, basically. We are also a Pan-African organization working across Africa, supporting governments together with private sector in their digital transformation. Now, my perspective and of AI from the African context, I'd liken AI to water. Water sort of nourishes us. It helps us. It helps us to grow our crops. In the same way, AI also helps us to be more efficient. It helps us to, digest a lot of information. It helps us to leapfrog. And I want to emphasize on the leapfrogging for Africa. You would know that, for instance, a number of Africans lag behind in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of transport, for instance. But if I take countries like Rwanda, Rwanda is leveraging AI to, with the help of AI and in drones, delivering blood supplies, for instance, to rural Rwanda. And these are locations that it's very hard to reach by car. And we are seeing an improvement in mortality rate, for instance, and this is based on AI. We are using AI in precision agriculture, for instance, in Ghana. I come from Ghana, and we have real use cases. And these are things that we would not have been able to do leveraging on our current infrastructure. So for us, indeed, AI is a way to leapfrog. But then, just like the duality of water, AI also has the part of, if we don't govern it, then what happens? If you don't uh, if you don't manage water well, it's going to flood your crops, it's going to flood your home, and if we don't govern AI, it's going to be disastrous. My 11-year-old daughter read a book that she thinks it will be reality, that in 2000 years to come, robots will take over the world. So if we don't govern AI, maybe it can also take over. But that being said, it doesn't mean that nothing is being done about that. We've had the AI, the Africa Union come up with the continental AI strategy. We've had Smart Africa also bring the blueprint. Some countries like Ghana, like Rwanda, also have their national strategies. So there are efforts towards that. But the question still remains whether this this approach we are taking is harmonized. Are we going together? Is it a multi-stakeholder approach? How linked is the AI strategy in Ghana to the framework that the African Union has developed, for instance? It's very important that we come together, first of all, that is harmonized, but also is fair and ethical. I think my other colleagues have spoken about it, and inclusive. For us, if AI is going to help us to leapfrog, we need to be able to make it be inclusive as well. In terms of the challenges within the African perspective, we know that the bedrock of AI is data, right? You need a lot of data to be able to properly utilize AI. But the number of data centers in Africa equals the number of data centers in Ireland. Look at the population of Africa, 1.4 billion, and compared to the population of Ireland. So we need to increase the infrastructure. We could say that we'll leverage on other people's infrastructure, which is what we are doing now, but I believe that it takes some sort of sovereignty from us. And if we are talking about ethical AI, fair AI, using AI within your context, it's important that our data is also within our jurisdiction so we are able to properly leverage it and make sure that it's sovereign. The second for us is the skills gap. I think 5 years ago, there was a craze about creating a lot of coders, but now AI can also code. So what do we do now? We need to be able to, I believe, for instance, that what we need in Africa is to use AI to increase and scale TVET skills. So, for instance, we are talking about um, electric cars. We are talking about assembling phones, for instance, in Africa. Why can't we use virtual reality, generative AI to create classrooms for people to learn these skills, for instance? Because we are not able to scale it up, but we can leverage AI to scale it up. But also, even within the space of software development, we still need people who can develop this AI and the robots and the rest. And the last one is also the data sets. And I think it speaks to the biases that my colleagues have spoken about. When most of the AI tools we have data sets that are from other regions, you know, we do not have the data sets in Africa. So that's one key thing that we also need to focus and build the data set so that the AI is African. It's to our story, like we did with M-Pesa. We can leverage on our own story to tell our story because AI is as intelligent as the data you feed it. So if you feed it with other cultures, other data sets, it will always go against us. And we've seen some of them when we've applied AI tools from, let's say, AI banking tools from other regions that are, rejecting people applying for loans just because they are of a certain race or of a certain gender. So it's important for Africa within that perspective. I know it sounds very nascent, but this it is what it is. We need to be able to create those data sets. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Very deep thought about the current situation of Africa and also challenges of Africa. I think many of those are shared by other people from around the world, but we also your talk also reminded me of the speech by Minister Al Sabaha in the opening session and also other speakers. Actually, it was very much impressive to hear, many speakers talked about AI in the opening of Internet Governance Forum. So everything is emerging together, and everything is related and reflected to each other. But we need to resolve one after another to make the best benefit from technologies, and we need to future proof. So, from that perspective, I would like to ask the viewpoint of youth generation. So, from Levi.
Right, thank you, Aida. I'm sure you can hear me, right? So, from I think maybe in addition, because what some of the things that the previous speakers have raised are valid and great concerns. Of course, there's a dual aspect of it, the good and the bad. Um, Talking about the youth perspective, I think a number of youths, give or take, they have contributed largely to the development of artificial intelligence, be it from the innovative stage and also how some of the systems are working. And the duality of it is others have used it to, for lack of a better term, like to cheat their way through, to leapfrog, but others are using it holistically and based on honest and truth, as well as transparency and accountability. Now, when you look at it from maybe touching a bit back in Africa, majority of the youths that I think have used AI have, among other things, been a source of data. We talk about data mining, for instance. Most of the AI tools have been trained by a number of youths. Let me give an example of recently, I think some Kenyan youths were protesting because the amount they were getting to feed data systems was way lower compared to the amount of data, the amount of money that these data systems are going to generate from it. So it's an issue of the balance between, you have the global north developing most of the AI systems, but the global south is being used to train and less investment in the global south is coming in. Thelma mentioned and raised an issue of data centers versus the number of the population in terms of how many people are actually using local data centers based on these advanced AI systems. A good example is, I think one of the arguments that we've had is we have most of the platforms and systems and technologies being used by majority of Africans not developed in Africa, which means data localization doesn't really exist in context. It can exist on paper, but in reality, data localization is not working. So in as much as we can talk about data governance, data regulation, we are building data acts, data protection bills based on the data that we actually don't host, which kind of, I think, created disparity because you have a data act supposing to govern data based on localized data, but most of the data that we're actually working and operating on is not being hosted on local platforms. So you have uh, a bigger gap in terms of governance of data in Africa based on the data that we're actually not hosting in the first place. So it comes back to who then hosts the most of the data, and how do we create local acts or bills or laws to govern the data that we're using when it's actually not being hosted in Africa. So when you talk about what should be then the priorities and the expectations from the youth perspective is how much influence do we have on the on the data that we are producing at a local level when it's being hosted outside of Africa? Because give or take, I can use this as an example. Majority of governments and civil society organizations that are based in Africa are not using local tools. For example, I think Microsoft is one of the big techs that most African countries and governments and civil society are using as a platform. Microsoft 360, a good case in point, right? We use most of the data and it's not stored in Africa at all. Most of the data centers are not based in Africa. Yet the data that is being received from Africa is something that we expect to input into AI, and we're talking about governance. So I think when it comes to youth's perspective, looking forward is how then do we create a balance between globalized data versus governing data from the local perspective, and how much benefit then does African countries have on the data they are giving AI systems, which are not being hosted and leveraged from the African perspective. I think that's pretty much from the youth perspective, aside from just adoption of AI by majority of the youths in Africa. I'll end here for now.
Okay, thank you very much. Very interesting perspective, and it covers a lot of things. But now, it's very interesting to see. We gather for internet, and we talk about AI, and now we are talking about the data. So everything is related, of course, to each other, and probably we also need to talk about the infrastructure, such as data center or computing power. And also, Melinda talked about the supply chain, and the business is trying to reflect the governance discussion onto the reality of supply chain. But it's very interesting because from the government perspective, we are trying to reflect the reality of supply chain to the discussion of policy making. So there can be a kind of a very healthy mutual interaction, but if it fails, the future will not be very much productive. That's so very interesting. And as government, we have been making a lot of efforts in developing a governance framework, such as Melinda talked about the G7 Hiroshima Code of Conduct, which we spent a lot of time with Ambassador Beldier and other colleagues from G7 countries. And also, over the last few years, we had European Convention, AI Convention of European Council, and also we had EU AI Act in place, and also we had global partnership was integrated with OECD AI community. A lot of things happened over the last 1 or 2 years, and everything was connected to actually OECD. And my partner, Audrey Plonk, had been looking after probably everything, and she knows everything, I believe. And I would like to ask for her comment on her overview of this current situation, and also the point that previous speakers touched upon. So, Audrey, please. Audrey, I'm sorry, we cannot hear you. Just a moment. Can you try again? No, no, I'm sorry. Okay, so technical people is working on this, so please wait, and I will invite you once again later. And now, uh, so we talked about a lot of things, and we have touched upon data or infrastructure, and we talked about the challenges and the risks, of course, as well as opportunities, and also we uh, heard the views from different communities. So now we do not have enough time, but I would like to invite all speakers to make a comment on your perspective of about the responsibilities or roles or what you are planning to do uh, or as your own community, such as business, government, industry. Okay. Okay. So I would like to invite for the last comment from all speakers. But before that, I would like to invite Audrey to try again.
Does it work
Okay.
now?
Now I can hear you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. I think maybe I was in the observer room and not the speaker room. Um, anyway, thank you for the kind introduction, Yoichi, and hi, everyone. Sorry to not be with you in person, but I'm sure you're having a great IGF in Riyadh. Um, just on behalf of the OECD, we've obviously seen a lot of changes to the global internet governance space in the past 5 years since we initially adopted our first AI recommendation, which we just revised earlier this year. And of course, as Yoichi mentioned, we've had the emergence of safety institutes. We've had changes just recently here at the OECD with the integration of the Global Partnership on AI into our work program, and the emergence of a lot of different policy topics, many of which other speakers talked about. Just to give a couple of examples, we know that issues of data and AI are super important. They're critical. Everybody has said that in their own way, and we our expert community here at the OECD has more than 400 people. And one of the more recent things we did in the last 6 months is create a group focused on privacy and data and AI. So just to say that I think the topics on the table and the issues that you're coping with in different regions around the world, we see very much across the community that we work in, which is a broad global community. I would just say that if you're not familiar with the OECD's AI Observatory at OECD.ai, it's really the place where we're trying to put as much data and evidence behind trends that are happening in AI. Trends like, what kind of language models are being built on what languages, so that policymakers can look at that data and start to shape a policy environment um, that implements the broad principles that I think we all agree on. Are things that have been mentioned before already, like around quality and fairness, around bridging divides and other things. So if you haven't checked out the observatory, it's a great place to look at things like where research cooperation is happening across countries, where patents are being filed, um, where investment is going into AI. And I think as we build that out, we have right now 70 different jurisdictions participating in the observatory, and invite many more to come join us. I have a colleague in the room that you can talk to since I'm not there. But a big part of what we're trying to do at the OECD is to provide as much interoperability and harmonization across different approaches, whether those be technical standardization approaches or policy approaches. I think many people said the importance of us operating on a global space and in a global way. And we're trying to bring our analytical and data driven approach to AI. And I think, just as we move forward into 2025, 2024 has been a very jam packed year of AI, and a lot of focus on important issues of safety, frontier models. But I also note the importance of that others have said about maybe not frontier models, just the day to day integration of AI. And I'll just close by saying some of the data we released earlier this year shows just how much runway there is for AI to diffuse or to be adopted across industries for a lot of potential benefit. And so I think, at best, we see about an 8% diffusion rate of AI technologies, and mostly in large companies. So to make AI both more accessible and more widely adopted, we think, and we know it has to be trustworthy, but also that we have to put some of these other framework conditions in place around safety, security, and fairness to make those numbers around diffusion go up. So I look forward to the rest of the discussion, and thank you, Yoichi.
Thank you very much, Audrey, for the comment. And I think the remaining time is very much limited, but I would like to hear one more voices from all speakers. And we always hear, inclusivity when we talk about the AI governance. And we had the GDC, and a lot of people are talking about the AI gaps, AI divide. So now I think OECD is a kind of small group with 38 member countries, but now after integrated with the GPay, they have more than 40 members, and they are welcoming more. So there will be a more inclusive group for AI discussion. But I think France has this similar perspective on AI governance, and when you are organizing Action Summit next year. So I would like to ask Ambassador what will be the objective and goals of AI Action Summit. You have just 2 minutes.
You hear me? Hello, hello. Yes. So in 2 minutes, first, maybe there is something we didn't say enough in this room, and maybe nor within the IGF itself. Of course, AI is not just a very promising technology. That's also a source of power and an intense competition between companies. They want to take the lead. Between that's also a geopolitical competition between models, and that's a competition between international organizations to take the lead. We have to face this. If we don't recognize this, we won't do a good job. And for us, for France, for a lot of people, one of big threat regarding the future of AI and the future of AI governance would be a fragmentation of the global governance. Because if we let a fragmentation happen, we will engage a race to the bottom, a race to the worst. Everyone, to remain strong within the competition, will propose the less, the weakest regulation or governance. So we have to stick together. We have to exchange. So yes, of course, we think that the political framework of the OECD is of the utmost importance. We discuss, we integrate, we aggregate, and we are doing a great job within the GPI and with the OECD. But we think that we need also a universal conversation. So the Paris Summit, the February 10 and 11, so soon now, in 2 months, will be probably the biggest international summit ever so far. So we did invite 110 head of states and governments, and we do expect something like 80 head of states of governments, and most of the uh, head of international organizations, and we will propose an agenda around what is a good but broad governance regarding all the holistic approach I did mention earlier. And that will be also a very intense multi-stakeholder conversation. So we do expect something like 1,000 or 2,000 delegates from research, from industrial sector, from private sector, from civil society, and we try to put the conversation about three main topics, or maybe four, because risk, security, safety institute, and even the conversation about catastrophic risk or existential risk still matters, but we will add three layers. Conversation regarding sustainable AI, because let's try not to break the planet again with this new technology and promising technology. A conversation about, yes, a broad governance, addressing all the concerns I did mention earlier, and a conversation about the needs of, but we don't know so far, public goods and digital public infrastructure, because frankly, we don't want these movements to be completely privatized. We need also public resources. And just to conclude with this, I travel a lot. I meet a lot of researchers everywhere, including at the biggest American universities. Today, let's face it, public research cannot reproduce the results of the biggest companies. So that's not your fault. You are not responsible. But we need a world where where there is a common knowledge, and where public research can reproduce at least, or maybe preempt, but at least reproduce the results of the private sector. So for this, probably we'll have to finance. We need more money in the public sector.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have 5 minutes left, but I would like to hear one voices from remain other speakers. So Melinda, what is your expectation, and what do you think you can do in developing AI governance and also AI ecosystem around the world?
Thank you. Um, so, just a couple things I want to touch on. I think, first of all, companies have a significant responsibility here, clearly. I think, particularly around participating in the international frameworks and initiatives that are being developed, adhering to them, working with safety institutes in their home countries to develop the research and evaluations of advanced models. I think being transparent with everyone about how their large models are developed, what they're capable of, what the risks are, how they're addressing risks, all of those things I think are really important and squarely on the shoulders of developers. And then I think there's a lot of partnerships that need to be developed in terms of public, private sector, whether it's on research capabilities, whether it's working to develop data that's going to be representative of the entire world. Meta's working with the Gates Foundation, which is not the government, but to develop African data for training. So how can we partner together to advance some of the common goals? I think that is going to be really important going forward. And I think we're starting to get a sense of what the real needs are and the real opportunities. And then no one can do this alone, right? So everyone has their interests to further, but we need to be doing it together. So I think really getting a clear understanding of where we can partner together to advance the governance, I think is the next phase.
Thank you very much. That would be very important. And what is your expectation, Telma?
Thank you. So I would speak from the governmental perspective. One of the key things or the key weaknesses we've seen is that there's a disparity between putting the governance on paper and enforcement. So in within the African perspective, we need to come up with ways of enforcing so that it's effective, because there's no point spending so much time developing policies, governance, and not enforcing. And on that, we are looking at things like giving tax breaks to companies who are compliant, uh, putting up authorities who are autonomous, those kind of things. So enforcement is a key thing to consider, but also multi-stakeholder. I believe that AI brings the world together even more than the internet. And so there's a need to have a universal approach to AI governance. And we fully support what the ambassador had said in terms of bringing everybody, having a universal approach. And that's what we do also at Smart Africa, to bring private sector, civil service organizations, the government, but it's only Africa. And so we need to also to go beyond Africa to create a sort of a universal model. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, enforcement is very important. Enforcement is very important, and actually, this is what we are working very hard on with Audrey. And before I invite Audrey to comment on this, I invite Levi to share your view. What is your expectation? And what do you think you can do at the youth community?
I think from the youth community, there are two parts. In my view, the first one is not leaving the youth in most of the conversation, especially when it comes to governance. Um, I'm not very conversant in as much as I have an idea of how other continents or other regions have done with regard to youth involvement. But with regards to Africa, partly there is a feeling among youths that governance mostly comes in to try and reduce or regulate innovative ideas before they actually thrive. So it's something that I think from the youths, the core is for government to engage youths with an open mind so that they allow for innovation to thrive, and then the safeguards on in terms of what are the risks can then be talked about with the youths in the meetings or in the room, and like talking about reducing certain access, because at the end of the day it looks more of we are trying to actually come against innovation by bringing regulation, and also the tendency to regulate something before fully understanding how big it is. It's also, I think, one of the challenges. Secondly, it's allowing for youths to continue innovating even when we are talking about emerging technology, in the context that youths, I think, have been at the heart of most of the innovative ideas. So when we talk about AI and emerging technologies, we don't have to think of the youths in terms of not knowing something, but allowing them the benefit of doubt to take the risk and allowing them to thrive and grow. Because most of the technical ideas or some of the infrastructure or developments where we have as foundations, most of them were actually built by the youths. So involving them, I think, from the start all the way to the end of the process is something that I would recommend. Or maybe also let me say this in front of the ambassador, considering the a number of head of state who are being invited, the question is how then do we engage the youths? Because if it's governments mostly making these policies, there's a high chance that youths' perspective are mostly left out in the room, and then youths are only involved at a later stage when they are behind most of the innovation. So I think trying to create a balance between government perspective versus the youth's perspective in most of the governance process becomes very critical.
We have a meeting this afternoon to prepare this.
Thank you.
Invitation from French ambassador to you. Sounds good. So thank you very much for the comment. And now we heard enforcement and innovation. And I would like to invite Audrey to talk about the conclusion on behalf of myself. So Audrey, please.
Thanks, Richi. I just want to say that governance is a lot more than regulation. Regulation is really important, but governance can include other tools. And I just want to not miss the opportunity to talk about one that we hope to be finalizing very soon this week, which is an implementation framework or a reporting framework to implement the Hiroshima AI Code of Conduct. And the purpose of this framework is to allow companies and institutions, organizations, to report publicly on their activities related to the code of conduct, so that we can take voluntary tools and move them from just sort of nice words on a paper to building out an ecosystem of information that can inform policy decisions. Because I think the prior speaker said rightly that we operate often in a vacuum. Those of us who work on AI day in and day out, we may know a lot, but there's a lot of stuff we don't know about AI. And it's very hard to implement a good governance and regulation in that vacuum. And so I think filling that vacuum in the void is an important step. And as part of that process to develop this reporting framework for the Hiroshima Code of Conduct implementation, we've also mapped this code of conduct to many other codes of conduct. And I think there's a way to make these different systems, for the organizations that we're going to be asking and hoping adopt and start to engage in this governance dialogue in more than just talking, which is also really important, but in more of information sharing in a concrete way that can help inform researchers and the public, that we make these tools as interoperable as possible, and that's not a negative thing for the world. It's instead advancing a system whereby we can compare and as we say, in an apples to apples way, we can compare like things together to see what's happening at a global scale. So hope to be able to announce good news there. I know you hope so too, Yoichi, as we really work to implement some of these extremely important activities in the governance space that have taken place over the last couple of years, and try to move them from out of the negotiating rooms and into the practical implementation phase. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Audrey. So actually, when the Hiroshima Code of Conduct is put in place in action together with the monitoring mechanism, that would be a very much experimental mechanism where the private sector and the government will work together to ensure the safety, security, and trustworthiness of AI systems in voluntary work. So that we know that is not the only answer, but we are making a lot of efforts to build up a governance framework which should be inclusive and trustworthy. And we, of course, understand this effort should be done in collaboration among different stakeholders, such as not only the government but industry and civil society, academia, other youth, and others. So I hope the today's discussion was very much productive and helpful to audience, and I hope we continue working together toward the open, free, and not fragmented and trustworthy AI ecosystem in global affairs. So thank you very much to all the speakers, and also thank you very much to audience. Very much sorry about the audio system, but I hope you enjoyed the discussion. So thank you very much. That session is closed.